Thank you so much, my friend. It's really great to be here. Thank you for your welcome. I come from a little place in southwest London called Wimbledon. Woo! Who's lived or visited Wimbledon? Who's watched it on the TV when tennis comes around? I think it's official that Wimbledon has the highest population of South Africans outside of South Africa. So if you haven't been yet, you're very welcome. It's a great place to live. I was preaching in a little church out west from here, in a little city called Cape Town. Inferior city. Yeah? Yeah, you're nodding. There's a few Cape Townians in the room. I think we need to do something about that. And I preached my heart out at this Apostolic Faith Mission Church. Had a great time. And the pastor, who's a good friend of mine, Trevor, he and the elders took me for lunch afterwards. So we jumped in the car after service, and the elders jumped in the back. I was sat next to Trevor, and we were on the way to the restaurant. I'm a foodie, so they were taking me somewhere extra special. And Trevor said, "Oh, we haven't invited the treasurer." Is the treasurer here? No, okay, I'll carry on then. We haven't invited the treasurer because he is a disciple of John. I thought, a disciple of John? Now, I've done a bachelor's in theology and master's in missiology. I read the Bible constantly. I had no idea what he meant. So I swallowed my pride, and in a moment of humility, a few minutes later, I said, "Trevor, what do you mean by a disciple of John?" And he quoted this. Luke chapter 7, verse 33 and 34. "For John the Baptist came neither eating bread or drinking wine. And you say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say he is a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners." He said, "We rather wanted to enjoy a glass of wine over lunch, and the treasurer is a disciple of John, and he wouldn't allow it. So we've not invited him." Trevor went on to tell me a story of a group of pastors who were out. They were Americans, so we can laugh at them easily. A group of American pastors who were out for dinner one evening, and the waiter came over and gave them the menus, and then he took the wine menu and he gave it to one of the pastors, and the most senior pastor at the table gulped. He reached out, took the wine menu from the other pastor, and gave it back to the waiter saying, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, we don't drink, at least not in front of each other." Well, I'm not here to advocate for whether you have a glass of wine with your lunch today or dinner tonight or not. What I am here today to talk about is what it means to be a disciple of Jesus rather than a disciple of John. You see, these are the two characters we have in this text we read this morning. Now, John the Baptist, he was a Nazarite. So the best place to find out about what Nazarites are is, of course, the Bible. So I'd like to read from Numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verses 1 till we get the point, but it gets there pretty quick. Here we go. "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, if a man or woman wants a special vow or a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazarite, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drink, and not drink vinegar made from wine, or other fermented drink. They must not drink grape juice, or eat grapes, or even raisins." You getting the point? As long as they remain under the Nazarite vow, they must not eat anything that comes from the grapevine, not even the seeds or the skins. During the entire period of their Nazarite vow, no razor must be used on their head. Clearly, I'm not a Nazarite. They must be holy until the period of their dedication to the Lord is over. They must let their hair grow long. Throughout their period of dedication to the Lord, the Nazarite must not go near a dead body. Even if their own father or mother or brother or sister dies, they must not make themselves ceremonially unclean on account of them. And it goes on. This is the Nazarite. This was John the Baptist. He was an abstainer. He withdrew. He didn't cut his hair. He didn't partake in wine. In fact, in the New Testament, it talks about John only ate locusts. I hope we're not having a locust today for lunch in Ndaba. Not much of a speciality here, anyway. But he had this approach to life that was about withdrawing and stepping back. So this is John the Baptist. He's a Nazarite. Now, let's turn to the book of John. Let's read about Jesus. John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. We know this really well, don't we? It's wonderful, poetic expression. And the Word was with God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all humankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, and his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or of a husband's will, but born of God. That's what we celebrated, wasn't it, in the baptism pool? The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. You see, Jesus was very different to John. John's distinction was being separated from and abstaining from, whereas Jesus was the total opposite. Jesus came from heaven to earth and stepped into our world. I love the Message version of this scripture, where it says, the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. Can you imagine Jesus moving into your neighborhood as a new neighbor? Hopefully we'd spot him. But it's a wonderful picture, isn't it, of Jesus being with us, not withdrawn from us. So this morning, I'd like to make 3 points, if I may, from this text. And then I'd like to pray with some people. Would that be okay with you? And, some are putting their hands up, and some of you said nothing. There's an exit there, and would that be okay with you? Great. I'd like to get your agreement. So, the first thing I'd like to say is this, that disciples of Jesus are known for what they're for. Disciples of John are known for what they're against. Disciples of Jesus are known for what they're for. Disciples of Jesus are known for what they're for. Disciples of John are known for what they're against. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at a business conference. Now, as well as running Cinnamon Network International, I run a little boutique business. Boutique is code for small. A boutique business. And I was asked to speak at this conference on the subject of networking. I immediately spoke to the organizer and said, thank you so much for your invitation. I love speaking. I love speaking in businesses, I love speaking in churches, but I just hate networking. I find it grubby. I find it disingenuous. Have you ever been talking to somebody, and we all get distracted, don't we, when we're talking to people, and you're talking to them and they're constantly looking over your shoulder to see if somebody more important's walked into the room. Ever happened to you? It's one of the reasons I hate networking. You ever stood talking to somebody and said, wow, they're really interested in me. They're asking me so many questions about myself. And then you realize, actually, they're not really interested in you. They're only interested to find out if you can be useful to them. And when they discover you that you're not, they're off like a shot. That's why I hate networking. So I explained this to the conference organizer, and he was a little bit deflated. And I explained to him, but I am passionate actually about the power of relationships. Relationships that grow people, relationships that grow teams, relationships that grow businesses, in fact, even churches. And he said, Matt, will you come and speak on that subject? I immediately agreed, but I didn't want to become known as the anti-networking guy. It's always bad to be defined by what you're not, don't you think? And so I thought, well, relationships are a science because we can all learn to do them better, all of us. And relationships are an art form because they take a lifetime to master. And so I was thinking about the art and the science and the study of relationships, and I thought, relationology. I quickly went to my computer, searched for the word, couldn't find it, so formed the company, trademarked the name and bought the web domain and launched my little boutique business. And ever since, I've traveled the world working with businesses to grow their revenue and their income by helping them build powerful relationships with their clients. And here in South Africa, I've worked with a number of the banks. But my point is this. Actually, it wouldn't be good for my business for me to be known as the anti-networking guy. It's always best to be known what you're for rather than what you're against. You see, John the Baptist was against cutting his hair. He was against wearing nice clothes. He was against eating bread. He was against drinking wine or even grape juice or even the skins or the seeds. He was abstaining from life. He was against so much. But Jesus, by comparison, he was for people. Even the people he didn't disagree with, even the people he did disagree with. He was for the tax collectors. He was for the sinners. He was for people in adultery. He was for even the Samaritans who the Jews had historically fallen out against. He was for them. And the Pharisees and the religious leaders of his time hated the fact that Jesus hung around with these people. Because fundamentally, Jesus is for people, not against people. And one of the challenges for the church, I believe, is this, that we are better known for what we're against rather than what we're for. We're more known for taking moral, ethical positions on things and being against them than being known for being for people and for their best. So I want to ask, are you more of a disciple of Jesus or a disciple of John? Are you better known for what you're against than what you're for? Are you better known in your workplace for what you disagree with than what you agree with? Are you better known in your community, in your neighborhood, for the moral position you take against things? Or are you better known for loving, caring, and serving people? Do you have the reputation for being a disciple of Jesus or being a disciple of John? Second thing I want to say is this. Disciples of Jesus live life to the full. Disciples of John live a life of abstinence. Disciples of Jesus live life to the full, and disciples of John live a life of abstinence. You see, Jesus came and he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He said, I have come that you might have life and have it in all its fullness. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. You see, what Jesus wants for us is a full life, a life of joy, a life of meaning, a life of purpose, rather than a life where we withdraw. Does that make sense? I was in Denver, Colorado in July And I went out for breakfast one morning, and I went to this organic food market. And I walked in, and there were rows and rows and rows of buffet, and there was lots of breakfast, sausage and bacon and eggs, and the next row was full of fruit, and the next row was full of nuts and salad. It was amazing. And there were 3 boxes you could choose from. There was the little small box, then there was the medium-sized box, and there was the big box, which actually wasn't that big. At least I didn't think it looked that big. And so I took it, and I went down each of the aisles, and I told my wife I did have fruit and salad as well, and I filled it up. I paid, I went outside and sat on a bench, and I began to eat this lovely, lovely breakfast in the lovely Denver sunshine. And do you know what? By the time I was full, the box looked like I'd never touched a drop. It was just, my eyes were certainly bigger than my belly. And you see, we have appetites, don't we? All of us have appetites for things. We might have an appetite for fashion. There's nothing wrong with fashion. We might have an appetite for wine. There's nothing wrong with wine. We might have an appetite to save money up in the bank. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. We might have an appetite for food and eat slightly more than we need. But we all have appetites. And those appetites can seduce us and consume us. You see, and as disciples of Jesus, actually, our commitment is actually to one desire above all desires. And that is to Him. And you see, our appetites, our greed, our gluttony, can actually take us further than we want to go. It might be an appetite that might be very public and everybody can see. Or it might be an appetite that's very private. And actually not even your husband or wife knows, or your best friend. But these appetites can consume us. So whilst Jesus wants us to live life to the full, we need Him to help us manage our appetites. Because He should be our number one desire. You know, I'm not a great faster. Anybody here a really good faster? Who fasts regularly? Oh, okay, I'm in good company. You see, the point of fasting isn't to twist God's arm to get Him to do something for you. Neither is the purpose of prayer to twist God's arm to get Him to do things for you. But you see, fasting has a very particular purpose. Because when we find something is consuming us, when we find we have an appetite for something and we realize actually it's getting to the stage where it's really unhealthy for me, actually fasting is a great tool to have. Because fasting is actually saying, I'm going to deny myself this in order to recalibrate and say, Jesus is my number one. That's the purpose of fasting. It simply gets our attention back from those things that consume us, back to Jesus, where our greatest desire should be. And as we live life to the full and enjoy the good things, I mean, when God created the world, He looked at it and said, that's pretty good. God is a very aesthetic God. He is pleased by beauty, by smell, by touch, by sound. It pleases Him. That's why He's created it. But the danger for us is when what He has created draws our attention rather than the Creator Himself. And I guess that's what the Bible means by idolatry, that we begin to replace our desire for Jesus with a desire for something else. And so could I suggest to you that actually if you have an appetite that's consuming you and beginning to control you a little bit maybe, that you might actually consider that ancient practice of fasting and say, no, actually, this thing is not my greatest desire. He is my greatest desire. And so how do we navigate this world in which we live? How do we know how to live life to the full? How do we know what we should and what we shouldn't do? Because the temptation when we get uncertain is we become dogmatic and we become fundamentalists. And we become a little bit like John the Baptist. Because if you don't know how to live in an environment, your instinct is to withdraw and abstain. That's the temptation. But that's not what Jesus asked of us. For me, there are two pictures of the will of God. One picture is of a tightrope, where you very carefully have to navigate your way through life, balancing on what you believe is the will of God. Because if you turn to one way or the other, then you will experience the worst. That view of the will of God is actually I don't believe is a godly way to see his purposes. It's framed by a disciple of John approach to life. Whereas I think a better picture of the will of God and how we navigate our way through life is to see life like an adventure park. An adventure park that we can run in and enjoy, when we can enjoy the many good things that God has made available to us. And actually, yes, there are some fences to protect us from harm, from danger, from machinery, from dangerous drops. But actually, within the park, we've got loads of freedom to play and experiment and choose and run and be with other people. And I believe that is actually a much better view of the will of God. Some of you are a little bit uncertain, so let me just take us back to Adam and Eve. You see, when God created the Garden of Eden, God said to Adam and Eve, "Eat from any tree you like, but not this one." He did not say, "Don't eat from any tree except this one." God gives us freedom to choose, freedom to make decisions within his will. Sometimes I meet people who are in decision paralysis. They don't know whether to go for that job or to move house or to make that big decision, and they're held in a place of paralysis because they're waiting for God to speak to them. And God's not saying anything, or doesn't seem to be saying anything, so they don't do anything. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and life passes them by. You see, I don't think we should live in a place of decision paralysis. I believe that in Scripture, God has revealed his purposes to us, and it's very clear about the purpose for our lives. It's very clear what we should be for, who we should be for, the values through which we live. So we should just get on with it. And occasionally God might speak and give us specific guidance and a steer. But that's the exception, I believe, rather than the rule. Because God has made his plans and his purposes known to us. So let's live a life of freedom in Christ. In fact, I would encourage you to love God and do what you like. Which may sound a little bit odd, but coming back to desires again, you see, if you love God, if God is your number one desire, if you have the mind of Christ and the heart of Christ, then actually you will only want good and godly things. So love God and do whatever you like. The only problem comes is when actually God isn't your number one desire and you have other desires, then you shouldn't do what you like. Because your heart will lead you to wrong things and wrong places and wrong relationships. But if your number one desire is Christ, then just love him and enjoy freedom. Enjoy this incredible life. Because being a disciple of Jesus is about living life to the full. Being a disciple of John is about withdrawing. It's my third point, and then I'm going to pray. Being a disciple of Jesus is about transforming your world. Being a disciple of Jesus is about transforming your world. Being a disciple of John is actually about stepping out of your world. It's about withdrawing from your environment, about disengaging, about creating your own world in which you can control everything and which feels safe, a world which is black or white, yes or no. But the reality is being in the world is not black and white, yes or no. It's grey, it's vague, it's nuanced. It requires a relationship with Christ to navigate it and walk through it. This is what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. Because if we went back a little bit in Luke chapter 7, just went back a few verses from 33 and 34. You see, John the Baptist, he'd sent his disciples to Jesus to say, "Are you the one?" So in Luke chapter 7, verse 20, it says, John the Baptist sent us to ask, "Are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else?" At that time, Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor." Wow. When we encounter Jesus, our lives are transformed. That's what we just celebrated publicly in the baptism pool. Dying to self and rising to life with Christ. When we encounter him, we can never be left unchanged. We can never be left unchanged. However, there is a religion in our world. And the Bible talks about the last days. And it says, in the last days, there will be a form of religion that denies the true power of God. It's a form of religion which preaches. It's easy to preach. It's a form of religion that prays. It's easy to pray. It's a form of religion that praises God. It's easy to praise God. But what's missing is practical action. You see, the book of James says that faith without works is dead. It's an empty religion. It might sound like Christianity, it might look like Christianity, it might even smell like Christianity. But it's not Christianity. It's a form of religion. And that's why when Jesus said to the disciples of John, "Go back and tell them that the lame are walking, the deaf are hearing, and the lepers are cured," and all of that, it wasn't until the very end he said, "And the gospel is preached to the poor." You see, it's easy to preach and pray and praise. It's actually much harder to live out this life sacrificially, loving and serving and caring for other people. So I started this non-profit organization, the Cinnamon Network International, because we want to help churches demonstrate their faith in their communities. So Cinnamon Network, we find brilliant church-led community projects, and we help replicate them across other churches. So we found this great project actually in Pretoria, where a church has adopted a local police station. And they started by building relationships with the police team, started praying for them, asked them what their needs were. The police station was a complete mess. Morale of the police team was low. So they said, "Could you help us with the police station?" So that the church refurbished the police station. And immediately morale of the team picked up. The church provided chaplaincy or pastoral services to the police. And police performance started improving. And then the crime in the community started reducing. What a brilliant project. Church-led project. And now it's been replicated in 7 other churches. So Cinnamon Network loves to find projects like that, where the church is actually demonstrating its faith actively in the community to transform lives, rather than stepping back and living in its ghetto. And in the UK, where I started Cinnamon Network, we've now found 30 projects like that Adopt a Police Station project. Models of best practice, welcoming refugees, working with people with mental health difficulties, working with young people who are caught up in antisocial behaviour, people wrestling with food poverty. And those 30 projects we've seen replicated in more than 3,000 churches across the UK. And now we've been invited to start this work in countries around the world, including here in South Africa. Not to bring anything from the UK, but to find what God is doing through your churches and say, let's do more of that. Let's take what works and let's help other churches not reinvent the wheel, but run something that works in the community. You see, disciples of Jesus transform their world. Disciples of John step out. They abstain. They withdraw. They build a ghetto where life feels safe and secure, rather than living the adventure that the Son of God modeled for us. He said, as the Father has sent me, I incarnated, moving into your neighborhood, so I send you. That's what Jesus said to the disciples. So this morning I wanted to ask you, are you a disciple of Jesus or are you a disciple of John? Are you engaging in your world and transforming it? Or are you a disciple of John and withdrawing? So I'd love to pray for some people. Disciples of Jesus are known for what they're for, not what they're for against. Disciples of Jesus live life to the full, not a life of abstinence. And disciples of Jesus transform the world around them rather than withdraw into a ghetto.